Okay, the turbocharger again. Uh-huh. And this is your cars so far. Okay. The test car stands out. Not doing superchargers yet. Okay. And the Corvette in Group 4 is still supercharging. Yeah. So then there's the GT from 2018, the BRZ from 21, the 4C Group 3, Group 4, and the RZZ and RZZ. Right. But I just did the 4C. Right. In a time trial. Right. Now what's the issue exactly? The aspiration and the steering response. And the power to weight distribution. Right. Which is too much for the driver. Car's fine, but if you pick the wrong turbocharger, mid-rear or front, right, you're gonna hurt yourself, or it's pretty bad drive. So you have to underdrive. Right. You just cannot underdrive enough. Okay. We're gonna look at this lap. You'll see. Now, I'm not saying there's no turbochargers, right? But you'd have to mainline the front rear natural aspiration, and then over time you could turbocharge mid rear front, right? Whichever way you want, with whatever turbocharge you want. But you have enough natural aspiration, right? You'll see what the turbocharger does. That just will give you an injury as a driver. And then there's no car, by the way, either. Maintenance and production wise. Right, you'll see. Forcey. Uh-huh. You see the steering response? Right. That's too much for the driver. No matter which build, wheelbase, power to weight distribution you have, like that's too much. So the steering response is just way too much. No matter if you just change the settings or change the parts or okay. So it just gives out at the steering, right? So now you don't have a left or a right, no matter what you do. You're always trying to just hold on or just understeer or have less steering than you would like to have, right? And then so you're thinking the throttle and the shifting, and then where you're going to be when the car finishes the turn, right? Out and out. And so you're trying to have a left and a right thing going on, right? Power to weight distribution being what it is with the aspiration, it gives out on you. Like, you just don't have the before and after the out, and then before and after the apex, and before and after the out of the turn, right? Because of the aspiration and the power to weight distribution from the wheelbase. Okay. So it's not just the 4C. And see? It's upsetting to the track and you as a driver, because I couldn't see that was going to happen. That's never happened before, right? Like, that's weird. You could say the temperature, the humidity was just you know, like you draw it in and like you just like made your own weather upsetting, right? And look at the size of the 4C, by the way, and then tell me there isn't a weird in between the left side or the right side, like you're just not on the left or on the right, right? Defensively, right? Like on the turns, you see where I'm sitting, like in the middle of the track, like where's the overtake where the other guy is supposed to be allowed to pass and they're given enough space? And look at what it does. I am turn after turn after turn. The second turn, left or right, it's in the middle of the friggin' track, basically. Look, see? Right. So I can't out and out easily, but it just responds like at the last possible minute, or second, or time. But because I'm behind the steering response or the inputs, no matter how slow and how many, like, less and less inputs I use or do, right? because of the aspiration. Okay. So I'm on the throttle, and there goes the aspiration. Enter the steering response, wheelbase power to weight distribution. I'm ahead of the track and somehow too far behind to be able to respond defensively. Right. And then I'm nowhere in the track whether I want to be left or right in before the turn, so that I can out, and then the shifting isn't where it's supposed to be, at the out, at the in, or at the out. You see? Okay. And then it sounds so bad. So there's even like a noise level you have to account. Like the vibrations on my hands and like physically are just too much, no matter how much less and less inputs I use. Okay. You could go, we'll go down the list of cars later on, but you could go to the Lancer, and it's the opposite of the 4-seat, more or less. Like the Lancer is like a tall, lengthy, you know, car. Right. And I'm not saying there's no turbocharger, but you cannot tell me that this is at the expense of just, like, it doesn't have a leg to stand on or like much ground to just plant its feet much. No. There's not enough front rear naturally aspirated that you could do to just turbocharge mid rear front and then safely and then comfortably turbocharge. Right. And you saw the spill that we had at the Grand Prix before the Green Hill. There's another spill that we have later on because the track is just saying, well, this is too noisy. The ventilation, the aspiration, the temperature, I cannot do anything with this. Even like the trees and stuff. Right. We could look at the clouds and say like, okay, left, right, left, right, left, right. In terms of like orientation from north and then right, going around to the right. Right. And then where is the aspiration this is enough of? Right. Maybe you have to be having like that driving at a crawl. Like, right, you have to be like so slow, which I already am. So how slow do you have to go to be a turbocharger? Okay. And it's kind of like driving on automatic or driving in real life a little bit. The shifting points are nowhere, I would say, or you could say, and then you have to be at, you know, the gear that you are, like this with the throttle. And look, I'm nowhere in the track. I can't be anywhere safely. I'm trying to go left, right, where is this car on the track? And then it gives out. Right. I don't have the response to be safely where I want to be on the track, wherever the turn is, even if there's nobody on the track, let alone with other drivers or a car list. And then carousel is coming up, so I'm thinking what I'm thinking. There's no way I'm getting this right, or I wouldn't be surprised. So I do this. Right, the tires start screeching. Right. And then I hold for as long as possible, and this is the example of it. Just, I don't have the steering response all of a sudden because of the aspiration. So then there's no car or driver. Right. It's more driving, yes. It's more exciting as if you've done enough front rear naturally aspirated. Like I'm saying, there's driving here to be done, right? But this is so complicated. For that carousel, for me to have had it, I don't know what I would have had to have done. Like the steering response in the aspiration, whenever the shifting point was or wasn't so many times. Right. And I'm telling you, it gives out. It just careens or just keeps driving itself after no matter what you've done or what you could do. Right. And it just obviously too much car for driver or for the track, or you'd have to be minding so many details, which is fine for me. Right, with enough front rear natural fitted. Right, but this is such a headache though. Okay. And look, it just pulls me to the left or to the right, like surprisingly. From the aspiration alone, I can tell. And then it's messing up like the temperature and the water because of the clouds this track day. And then you're doing this, like just the throttle as comfortably as I can possibly hold on to it. Right, because then you have like a physical injury. Right. And then it's throwing me like this, you see? You could drive this fast. I could drive this fast with an injury after, and then no more driving for a long, long time. Okay. And it would be fine if I didn't have to get funny looks from maintenance and production going like, you know you ruined this track. And I'd have to be like, yeah, so sorry. I never mean it enough. You know? Right. Check. But then there's turbocharger for real. Right. Check. It's so much, isn't it? Yeah, no. I'll show you with the car list. And we'll do the RZZ or the RZZ front and mid rear with a different wheelbase and power to weight distribution. Right. And eventually the GT. Okay. And the BRZ. Okay. The GT is like a long car. In real life, that's not a drivable car for me. Now there's the BRZ. Okay. And the BRZ is, you know, low-key, leaning, you know, Lancer. Right. There's no WRX, by the way. Okay. And then you could off-road or go off the track and then... Uh-huh. No, right? No. Like for a season, temporarily, as a thing that you do, but then you eventually just go back to front wheel naturally aspirated. You can't physically. You just can't physically. Look. Supercharger test car. Right? Supercharger C7. And then GT 2018, and then BRZ 21, and then 4C Group 3, Group 4, and then RZZ Right. Now look. We're going to go to the aspiration, and we're going to go turbocharger, and then we're going to go category. As much as possible, by the way. In Group 3s and Group 4. And then these other Group 3s and Group 4s, by the way. Now here's a Lancer, by the way. Prime example of just like a drivable car. And then I personally like the RSO1 because the ventilation is so nice, but it's just not race, you know? And then there's the McLaren. Small car, big car, long car, tall car. Here's the RZZ and the 4C, right? Here's the Lancer again, but it's four-wheel drive, and then it brakes, or there isn't any, much, unless you go from front and then mid-rear. Okay. And then look, big cars, little cars. Depends on four-wheel drive and then front and mid-rear. Right. Which the Lancer can be. Okay. So then by the wheelbase? Yeah. But again, like in a real car, if you could drive it in real life. Okay. And if it was in the car list, okay. Then if you could drive it, and it wouldn't upset the track. Because then there's the NSX crying and just like, over here, over here, over here. Okay. The Sirocco, the same thing. Okay. Because of the wheelbase and the power weight distribution and the front rear versus mid rear versus front. Right. Now you have a race or a car that you can handle. Maybe, if it's the car for you. But again, no, because it's turbocharger. Some more than others. Right. I could drive this RS01 all the time. All the time, comfortably. No problem. Someone else couldn't say the same. But some of these cars, nobody. Or you can't, not even without an injury. So, look. At the Lancer, right. Sitting in Group 3 and Group 4, turbocharger, right. So is the 4C and the RZZ. Right. You'd have to remain in the aerodynamics of the wheelbase and the power weight distribution that you could drive. Remember the NSX and the RS01? Okay. And the GT that isn't drivable? So is the BRZ, by the way. Okay. So it's hard to tell which car is for you that you could drive maybe, that is drivable. Okay. Enough for a season, for a stint, without an injury. Right. And on the track. Right. Okay. So then we pick the BRZ and the GT for just, I could never in real life reach the pedals or just handle the length or the wheelbase. Always the wheelbase. Yeah, it gives the entire game up. Or it gives it's all of the driving. Or none of it. Okay. So then the RZ set next later on, and then the BRZ and the GT car maybe. Supercharger something. It's a drive, it's a driving, it's a car, it's a thing, No, long term. Or it just ends in no. Yeah?